nowadays, a lot of companies have systems such as Workday or any type of online training program that the employees do when they first get into the business, right? So they usually call it like an orientation or something where you have to do the classes on Workday, and some of them renew every year. Sometimes it's every 3 years, 5 years, every month, every quarter. It just kind of depends. But these types of trainings are more important than you may think. If you work for a W-2 employee, this is something that you might have a headache, right? You're probably thinking right now, oh, snap, I have to go do that certificate real quick. Let me just go in and do the training. So why is that, right? Well, these trainings serve more than just to train. They serve as a barrier for legal issues, and it's an agreement from your end and the employer that there is an understanding of what is expected if you were to be in that specific scenario, right? For example, a training you might have to do is workplace harassment, and you watching the video is an agreement between you and the employer that you will not perform those functions. And at the end of the video, you usually have to sign, or there's some sort of acknowledgement that you both agree to, right? The company has already signed their version, and then you're going to sign yours. Whether or not you actually viewed it is one thing, but you're agreeing that you read it, that you saw the videos, and that you understood it. So in the event that you violate one of those terms, the workplace has the authority to either terminate you or do a training or write you up, whatever it may be, depending on the severity. But that is the importance of having these types of programs in place. Now, I would go as far as to say that you should also have them sign your one-on-one coachings with them. Okay, if you have quarterly coachings with the team, then you should be having them sign some sort of paper that acknowledges where they are standing at that current time. You don't want to be in a situation where you've had an employee who's been lagging for an entire year, and then it takes you, on the last quarter for you to bring it up, and then at the moment of you trying to terminate him, the employee says, hey, well, I was never told anything. You might say, yeah, I brought it up to you in a conversation, in April or whatever, and the employee's like, I don't remember that. Well, and this is going to vary a lot depending on the type of business you work for and how your organization is, but if you work for a pretty big company, then you're going to have an HR department, and they're going to have to review these types of things, right? Well, hang on, did you actually talk to the employee? Yes. Well, can you prove that? No. I mean, do I have to? It was just a verbal conversation. Yeah, you do. Because if you wrongfully terminate him and he sues you, you don't have any documentation, well, guess what? It's going to be a lot bigger trouble than if you just would have had some sort of written proof that you guys reviewed his performance, right? His or her. And I really want you guys as managers and as entrepreneurs and business owners to understand the importance of documentation. It's very, very vital for you as a business owner to have documentation of important conversations, of changes in policies, anything that is major that can bite you in the back. If something were to happen, you need to have documentation of this, especially if you work in a workforce that is very high pace and stuff can go south and people can lose their lives. Anything that severe, you need to have documentation. Okay, don't play around with that. Don't say, yeah, I'll get to it. Yeah, but the operation's doing so good, and look at my margins, and everything's performing well. Guys, I get it, but you have to go back to some of those baseline procedures. You need to have documentation for everything. Okay, cover yourself, especially if you're a business owner, because guess what? You are the one that's going to be directly impacted if something were to happen. Okay, make sure you cover your back when you do these types of things, and make sure you have documentation for employees, for policies, for trainings, for everything. Okay, write it down. Keep it in keep it in a document, in a folder online, in a shared drive of cloud, wherever you need to save it, but save it and keep it. Okay, so let's talk about one-on-one coachings, right? So you as a manager or a soon-to-be manager or a business owner, you're going to have employees that are going to report to you, and you should be doing one-on-one coachings with them. That means that you sit down, and then they sit down, and you go over kind of their performance, right? So you can say, okay, John, hey, John, well, I noticed that some of these emails that you've been sending, they were a little bit rude, and the customers, they've been writing reviews about that, about our customer service. What's going on there? Can I help you? One-on-one coachings serve a vital function because they kind of push employees back online, right? So let's say this, like you have an employee who's in S tier and they're on the right track, and slowly throughout the year, you kind of see them, moving to the left a little bit. They're wandering off, and that's what their one-on-one coachings are for. You bring them back and you say, hey, hang on, don't do this and do this instead, because you also been doing this, and I don't know, you've been the top performer, you always go out of your way to help the team, these things are really good, but just keep in mind that you're kind of easing off on this side and it's affecting us because the customer's upset or whatever. And the key points of one-on-one coaching is that you and the employee are on the same terms and understanding. I can't emphasize how many times it happens where they throw the Dave Chappelle quote where they're like, well, I didn't know I couldn't do that. And you're like, wait, what? You didn't know you couldn't do that? Like, yeah, I've been doing it because nobody told me I couldn't and nobody said anything, so that's just what I've been doing this whole time. You're like, okay, well, I'm telling you now not to do it. And guess what? It gets fixed. But if you don't have these conversations with the employees, it's going to keep snowballing into a bigger issue. And I'm telling you right now, habits that form for a long time are going to be harder to change than habits that you catch quickly because you're stomping them as they're happening. Not when they're already formed and then these people think you're attacking them or whatever. No. One-on-one coachings establish that off the bat. You need to have them. You need to have them with the direct employee that falls under you. And if you have a lot, well, guess what? You need to allocate the time to sit with every single one of them and hear what they have to say so you can give them those performance reviews. Because if you don't, and again, this goes back to documentation. If you don't have your one-on-one coachings done and you were to terminate an employee and they go and they get a lawyer and they say, hey, they wrongfully terminated me because I have done nothing wrong, and you can't prove that you had one-on-one coachings where you purposely tried to train the employee, teach them what to do, you went over the SOPs, you did everything you could, and they still didn't perform well guess what? You have yourself covered. But if you don't do that, you can find yourself in a bad situation. And just because it hasn't happened now doesn't mean it can't happen in the future. And I've seen it happen, and that's why I'm emphasizing this, because it can happen, and just because it hasn't doesn't mean it won't. And when it comes to goals that you guys are giving the employees, even if it's the same across the board, let's say you work in sales or in operations or whatever, and everybody's goal is the same, don't tell them that when you're doing your one-on-one coaching. Don't say, oh yeah, everybody has the same goal. No. It's supposed to be an individual goal, so you need to drive it home like that goal is specifically for them, even if it's not. The point is, make them feel like the goal is just for them. It's a unique goal tailored for you because your performance is so well and you're going to help the company and all this other stuff. It needs to be felt to them like it's specific to them. Don't make it a general goal when you're talking to them like, yeah, this is the industry goal and this is where you are and this is what Becky in Arizona, even though you're in Texas, this is how Becky did and this and that. Like, no, just say, hey, this is your goal and I want you to reach it, and how are we going to work together to get you to that goal? Because the more it's generalized, the less they're going to care. The more it's unique to the employee, the more they'll care. It's that simple, right? And I think we can all agree to that. We don't tend to care about generalizations and stuff that happens to everybody because we're all in our own little bubble. But if we kind of put those goals in their little bubble, guess what? It's part of them now. And they're going to work harder for that. So my point is, don't speak to them when you're coaching as if it's a general conversation that you're going to have with everybody. The conversation you have with each employee has to be unique to them, as if their goal is only theirs. And their goal may not only be theirs, but guess what? Their performance, their feedback, and how their experience has been to reach that goal will be specific to them. And that's where you grab onto that, right? So they have their specific scenarios that they're going through. That's where you, as a manager, you need to grab onto that conversation and then you build on it. Meaning that if there's something important that they said, you follow up. Okay, yeah, well, why is that? Get their feedback, because their feedback is important because they're the first line runners, right? So again, coaching, one-on-one coaching is important. Do not generalize your coaching. Don't make it seem like you're talking through a script with them, right? because everybody's going to be unique in their experiences, and give them feedback on the experiences that they're telling you and their, what their experiences are. And if they're not, if they're not talking too much to you, you just need to crack them. Okay, you need to squeeze it out of them if you have to. You have to change the conversation. You have to find a way to get to them, because everybody's unique and everybody's value is important. Even if their value is so bad, let's say that they say something that's completely out of whack, then at least man, I don't know if they're fit for the job. But hey, at least you got something out of it, and that's the point of the one-on-one coachings. If you're a manager and you're remote and you don't necessarily see your employees, these one-on-one coachings may be a little bit off because they're not physically in front of you, and I think that being physically present is the best way to do it. Now, if you're in person, it's perfect because you guys are doing it face-to-face, which is, in my opinion, the best way to do a coaching, a one-on-one coaching, is in face-to-face, because you guys can really gauge each other's body positions and your movements, and you can kind of see how they're reacting to what you're saying better, and you can tweak it, right? So you can also kind of grab a little bit more of conversation from them because you're in person, and you can really see maybe you say something they don't like, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to hit that topic again, I'm going to move over to this one. Or maybe you say something that they do like and they're enjoyed, then okay, cool. Being in person brings that out a lot more than being on a phone call. I would say do not do a phone call for these types of conversations. If you are on Teams, if you work remote and you have a remote team, then you should be doing these coachings on video through Teams or, I don't know, Zoom, whatever program you guys use. Make it a video call, and at least that way you guys can see each other. But you guys have to see each other. You have to, please. I know it sounds, oh, come on, whatever. And it may seem that way, but it's just courtesy. And if you don't care enough to turn on your freaking camera to have a one-on-one coaching every quarter with an employee, then you need to evaluate your position as a manager, straight up. And this is especially true if you are also the business owner, because then you don't care about the performance of your business. Because if you truly cared, you would want your employees to perform at the top level. And guess what? At least putting a Zoom camera and at least seeing each other face to face should be the bare minimum that you should expect from yourself and from your employees. So in your one-on-one coachings, you should be pulling out your KPIs specifically for that employee. If they don't have KPIs that you really monitor for them, you should have some. I can't think of an operation or a business where KPIs don't exist for that specific employee, or at least their area of management or something. If you're a manager of a manager, well, then you should be evaluating the performance of the team or whatever. But if you don't have KPI specifically set during your one-on-one coachings, that's something to really consider and see what you can create to get that type of information. And if you don't really know where to start with that, I do offer coaching for a lot of these services on my website. So take a look at that, see if something fits, and schedule a call with me, and we can go ahead and get that started. So you review your KPIs. Ideally, you should have the manager and the front lines doing these types of things monthly and weekly, how we spoke about in the previous video. But if you're kind of higher end, you should be doing these quarter reviews with that manager as well. So take into consideration the type of manager you want to be. My recommendation is that your supervisor, meaning that, and every job is different and every title is different, people will call manager somebody who's not really a manager or whatever, it depends on the business. But you have the frontline workers who are actually doing the dirty stuff. Then you have the person that's right above them that they report to. That person, in my opinion, should be doing weekly coachings with all the employees by reviewing the KPIs. And I'm not talking about individual coachings. I'm talking about team coachings where you guys review the KPIs as a team and you say, hey, this is where we're at. Okay, we're on track. Hey, man, you're kind of slacking. What's up? Don't call them out in front of everybody, but just show them numbers and they'll know, right? If it's something really severe, then yeah, the supervisor should be bringing him in for a one-on-one. Then you have the manager that's in charge of that supervisor. And you may have multiple supervisors, right? Maybe you have branches or whatever, but you have that manager who's managing the supervisors and who manage the employees. They should be doing it, in my opinion, at least every month so that they can make sure that their supervisors are on task with their supervising policies, everything that they have to do, their tasks. Now, Here is where it can get a little bit tricky because you have a manager that manager is going to report to, and in my opinion, that manager should be doing it quarterly. Here's the thing. If you are the manager that's going to be doing quarterly ones and your business is on a downtrend, should you wait a quarter, meaning 4 months, to do those types of coachings? No. You should do those coachings sooner depending on how bad it is. If your business is spiraling out of control, guess what? You are not here anymore. You're here. Yes, you're going to be micromanaging, but sometimes you have to kind of get involved to that point to get stuff running to where it needs to be. So the amount of coachings is going to vary drastically depending on how well the operation is going. Okay, ideally you have a good supervisors that are supervising the frontline workers, and then you have a manager that's managing the supervisors and making sure that their goals and tasks are aligned, and then you have the manager of the manager who's making sure quarterly that everything is good and that the margin is on track to where it has to be. So right now, knowing this, you really need to sit back and say, okay, where's my business? Where's my, and when I say business, if you're a W-2 employee watching this also applies to you because your own area of management is like your little business, okay? So if I say business, just take it as to, your area of management. So you should be thinking about where you stand and what kind of changes you need to make and how often you need to be doing the coachings. If you feel that a quarter is too long, hey, cut it back. That's just my recommendation based on a good, flow network. But if you think you need them sooner, make them sooner. I actually prefer to make them sooner as well if things are not running the way they're supposed to. If they are, then hey, quarterly ones are fine. Anything drastically that pops up while you're reviewing them, you can always bring up to your manager. And an important factor here is understanding why your coachings or your KPIs might reveal that they're not on track, right? Because that means that there's a deficiency in the process. Now, here's something to consider. When you're looking at your KPIs and you're checking the performance, if there is one employee who's doing bad, then that's an employee issue, right? But if there's a shift that's doing bad, that might not be an employee issue. That might be an operations issue with the supervisor who's not making sure that the employees in general are doing their job, or there's a lack of customers, or something is not happening the way it's supposed to. Why is first shift doing this much and second shift doing this much? Do you have the same amount of people? If you do, then you might have to consider cutting them if the workload is just not there. Or is there something else that's driving customers away? Is there just not enough work? What is going on? That deficiency is where you start checking. That's where you start, right? When you analyze these KPIs and you're reviewing it with the one-on-one coachings, and it all ties back, right? So you identify the deficiency. You say, hey, second shift is having way less work. Okay, on the one-on-one coachings, I'm going to bring them in and I'm going to start asking them about this. So ideally, you fix this before. But let's say, for example, that it's something that just happened about a month ago and you caught it, and then you do the one-on-one coachings and you say, hey man, what's going on here? I noticed that you work on second shift. Do you feel that it's a lot of work? What's going on? Get their input, right? They're there. They're in the front lines. Oh yeah, dude, something's dead. Okay, well, what do you do when you're not working, when you don't have anything to kind of do because there's no customers? Oh, I don't do anything. I just kind of sit there and, just wait for work to happen. Huh. So you just sit there. Cool. Well, we don't have the work for you to do, so I guess, deuces, right? You've been paying an employee that hasn't been working because the proper evaluations were made for the second shift in this example when you were doing your coachings. But the KPIs show that there's a big downtrend month over month on this stuff. So guess what? You identify the deficiency. Why is it happening? You've already asked the employees, you kind of got some input. Obviously, they don't really know because they are not the ones that are doing marketing or sales or whatever. So it could be a marketing issue. It could be a bigger issue. Who knows what it could happen at, right? We don't know why in this example. But the point is you've identified it. Now the goal is to work around it and get it resolved, right? If the deficiency happens through one employee, then that's where you as the manager really need to step up and bring them in and make sure that they're getting the training that they need. Either you talk directly to the other managers that are closer to them on the hierarchy, or you do it yourself. And that's what it means to be a manager, is that sometimes you need to manage, and the higher you are on the totem pole, the more experience you will have and the more understanding of these things you will have, because your frontline supervisor may just not know. And guess what? That also falls back on you, because then that means your supervisor is not properly trained on that. So now you need to train two people. You need to train your supervisor to make sure they can catch these types of deficiencies when they happen, and you need to train the employee directly. Maybe not you can have the supervisor train them, and that way they learn to keep an eye out for these things as well. But my point is, you need to resolve the issue by proper training and doing the things that managers do, which is catching deficiencies. Again, if it's something with the entire shift, then you might need to start allocating why that's happening. Is it because you don't have enough customers? If you don't have enough customers, is it sales? Is it the hours that you're open? Do people just not know you're open? Is there competition? Is there something that people are going to that just drive them away from what you're doing? Is it you don't just have enough contracts? It can be a lot of things if it's general, right? But a downward trend is something red, and you need to identify it. So let's say that you talk to the employee and you kind of get stuck where you don't know what to do with them because you retrained them already and they haven't fixed the deficiency. That employee just every month, every week, they're the lowest one. What do? I already retrained them. I already had them sign the documentation saying they know what to do. I already had the supervisors trained. The supervisor has trained them. The manager has trained them. What do we do with the employee? It's not working. So again, there's a lot of different ways you can handle this. If it's a supervisor, you could consider demoting them if they're the lowest person on the totem pole. You could also do an IDP, an individual development plan with them. If it's honestly, sorry to say this, but if it's a position that has high turnover already, I would just terminate them and get in another employee. And sometimes these are already done through hiring a third-party agency that fills in those spots, like let's say forklift drivers, right? Or clerks for an office. That is pretty basic. If somebody's not performing, you don't have to wait. Honestly, it's hurting your company. I just please try to train them at least, because it's still a lot better to keep somebody in the company that you properly train and that they understand than just firing every person. And guess what? I'll tell you this right now. If you're having this issue more than once a month, or every month you seem to be having turnover on a specific spot, it may be a training issue. So you need to kind of make sure that you have your own ducks in a row before you start firing people, okay? Because the turnover is just going to keep happening. But if it's somebody that hey man, dude, right off the bat we knew, yeah, I would go with termination. You already have the signatures, you already went over that, you already retrained them, you tried your best, but hey, it is what it is. Now, if the employee is a manager or somebody pretty high up there that you can't just do that to, I would say do the individual development plan. Set up the steps, have them agree and say, hey, this is what you need to do to fix it. This is where you're at, these are my expectations, and this is where we need you to be, right? You are not responding to emails, you didn't finish this task before you left it to the next shift, and if you don't happen to fix these in 30 days, then you're going to get a write-up, right? And then you can eventually lead to termination. And you can also always ask your HR department. And one of the last things I want to mention is constructive criticism is very important for you, especially as a manager, to do. You may have a lot of employees under you, and if that's the case, and you're going to have to explain things to them in different ways. That means that you have 10 different employees. Guess what you're going to have to do? Explain the same thing 10 different times. Because it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And everybody receives feedback a little bit differently. Now, you might say, oh man, that sounds so annoying. I don't even want to do that. I was just thinking about sending a mass email. Guys, if you're the business owner and if you have a team, it's very valuable for you to do these types of things because it builds camaraderie between everybody, and it helps you build that rapport with them, which is what you need as a manager. There might be some high performers, there might be some low performers, and guess what? You're going to have to say things to them a little bit differently because of their individual culture. People grow up differently, especially if you live in a city that's very diverse, because somebody's experiences are going to be different. Maybe they learn better with a firmer tone. Maybe somebody's very sensitive to that type of thing. And I'm not trying to paint the picture that you need to be a nice person, but I'm trying to say that the better you are as a manager in your communication skills with the team, the better they're going to be able to perform for you. And constructive criticism, where you give them feedback on the negative things that they're doing and how, keyword here, how they can improve on them, is vital. So I'll end the video with that. Constructive criticism is extremely beneficial for you as a manager and for the whole operation, and eventually for the bottom line. So please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Leave any feedback you think that would be beneficial for me. I am definitely open-minded, and I will review all the comments and see how I can improve so I can give you guys some better services. There's also a link in the bottom for a school community that I created. Please make sure to join. It's going to be filled with people who are like-minded, who are into growth, who are into business, who think about finance, who kind of like math sometimes when it works for them, who like science. It's meant to be a community of people with different experiences and different expertise where we can all grab the best parts of each other and build better character. I also have a link to my website if you guys want to review that. It has some coaching links on there with calendars that you might find available for you if it's something that fits your needs. If not, that's perfectly fine. These YouTube videos are completely free and I created them to help as many people as I could. So thank you guys so much for watching and peace.